Hey everybody, this is Tracy here for another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here to recap 911 on Fox, Season 1, Episode 7, which was titled Full Moon, in parentheses, creepy as Fuck. Okay?
911, what is your emergency?
So the show starts out, and we have like a woman talking in the background, and the camera is like zooming in on an image of a full moon. And so as it pans back, we realize that it's actually Henrietta, and she's kneeling down in the sand, and she's talking about the meaning of the full moon, and telling the history of how the full moon came to be and the superstitions that's attached to it. Then the scene moves on to where she's at home, and her and Karen are getting ready to go to bed. And Karen is kind of frisky, but Henrietta just wants to cuddle and go to sleep. And so they get into a discussion about the full moon and all of this stuff. And so Karen, I guess she's feeling some kind of way because Henrietta doesn't want to be with her in that way. But Henrietta says, I'll give you all that you need tomorrow night, but tonight let's just cuddle with each other. Then the scene goes over to a carnival or fair, and there's a little girl stuck in this machine. You guys, if you've ever been to the fair, it's that machine. It's like a grab thing, and you try to pick up a stuffed animal with this little contraption. Well, somehow the little girl got into the machine. I ain't figured that out yet. But Buck comes and he cuts the glass away and gets her out of the machine. And so then we go over to Abby. So Abby's at work, and Buck calls her, being silly and, asking her if she's ready for the full moon because he knows the freak's going to come out at night with these crazy phone calls. And so he says that, he doesn't believe in the whole phenomena of this full moon because statistically there is no information that proves that weird things happen during the full moon that don't happen any other time of the day. So he just thinks that because people bring attention to it, that's what makes it seem so bizarre and crazy. So then we get our first call in, and it's an elderly lady, and she's calling in because she's looking like she on the back of her house is like all glass windows, glass doors, and everything. So she's standing there, and there's a man looking at her through the glass, and so she's freaking out, and she's calling 911 to tell them like there's a prowler or peeping tom on my property. And so she's like freaking out and panicking, and then she ends up collapsing, but she's still talking to them. So Abby, tries to calm her down and sends for help. Then Henrietta and Chimney arrive, as well as Athena. So while they go in to check on the lady, Athena goes to walk around the backyard to see what's going on. So while they're in there talking to the lady and tending to the lady, Henrietta looks up and she sees Chimney standing at the glass where the prowler was standing, and then she's like, what the hell? So then she turns around, but Chimney is still in the room with her. So then Athena comes in, and Athena's like, well, I didn't see nothing out there. The grass is wet. There's no indication, there's no footprints. There's no fingerprints on the windows. There's nothing to indicate that there was a prowler. So then Henrietta tells her to, go stand by the window or in front of the window. And so she stands where she figures the lady would have been standing when she made the call, based on where she collapsed at. And so they look, and they realize that the prowler was not outside, that he was actually in the house with the lady. And so they turn around and look on the floor, and of course there's like muddy footprints on like a rug that was behind the lady. And so I was like, oh my God. So of course, they check the house and everything to make sure there's nobody in there. But then a second call comes in. So this call was from a lady named Kathy, and she's reporting a burglar. Somebody's trying to get into her house, and she's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? And so she's hiding in a bedroom or something, and you can hear on the call like somebody kicking in the door, and then they come in, and I'm assuming, the way she was screaming, and it was just like this, this noise. like somebody was stabbing her to death. And I was just thinking, like, to be a 911 operator and you're on the phone when somebody's getting murdered, like, how do you? This is why there's such a shortage of 911 operators across the country. And I've mentioned this before, that here they operate at like 30% below capacity because they can't keep 911 operators on the job because it's so stressful. And so the lady, she's killed, and then a detective comes in. So he wants to talk to Abby, about the call, and they need to get a copy of the transcript. And so he's telling Abby that the lady was a victim of domestic violence and that they had a restraining order against the guy, that he wasn't supposed to come, and they had arrested the husband. And so he wanted to know, was there like anything on the tape, like a man's voice, anything that they could tie the husband to this murder. So then after the guy leaves, Abby, she just goes above and beyond the call of duty. So she calls in like the tape specialist guy and asks him to pull not only that tape, but also any other calls that may have came from this woman, because if she's a victim of domestic violence, she's probably called 911 a time or two. So they pulled the tapes and they're listening to the tapes and everything. And in the older tapes, the woman always calls the husband's name and lets the husband know, I have a restraining order against you. You need to leave. I'm on the phone with 911. Please don't come any further. You need to get off my property. And that was the other thing when Abby was on the phone with the lady, and she was like so hysterical. Abby had to tell her on the call to let the person know that she was on the phone with 911 and that police was on the way. So after listening to the tapes, Abby comes to the conclusion that the person that killed the lady, that killed Kathy, was not the ex-husband, because of the differences in the phone calls and how when she was arguing with the ex-husband, she didn't seem as panicked or scared as she was when she was arguing with the person that eventually came in and killed her. So they end up playing the tapes for the homicide detective, but he just wants to close the case, and he's determined it was the ex-husband. And he tells Abby, he appreciates, all her hard work, but pretty much you need to leave the detective business to me, and you just handle those 911 calls. And so Abby, she was standing her ground, like, this is why I don't believe it. This is why I don't believe it, but he was just like, thank you for your help. And if you come across anything else, let us know. So after he leaves, they realize that in the call, I think the call that came in October, that there was actually someone with the Kathy lady when the call came in, because you can hear the lady say, let them know that I have a restraining order, or he has a restraining order against him. So they do some little investigative work, to try and figure out how they're going to learn who this other caller was, who the other person was that was in the room with the Kathy lady when she called in October. So then we move over to Buck and Bobby, and they arrive at a yoga studio, and as they're walking up, they're talking about the full moon and how crazy people are during the full moon. And so it was a class for pregnant women, and they were like very, very pregnant women. And so the initial call came in because one of the women was doing one of them moves, the yoga moves where you got your shoulders down on the ground, but your leg is like sticking up in the air. And they surmise that she has slipped a disc, or a disc has slipped, and that's why she can't get out of the position. So they call for an ambulance, and they're like trying to roll her over without, causing her too much more pain. When all of a sudden a second woman starts having contractions. So they go over to her and they tell her that she has, and I didn't write down what the name of it was. And one of the things I love about 911 is as they're doing the calls, they're like telling you the medical terms of what it is that the person has. So what this lady had, what they thought she had, was this condition that causes premature labor, or for you to think that you're going into labor, but they're called soft contractions. And so they tell her, drink some water because you're probably dehydrated, and that's what usually brings it on. So they get the lady some water. Then a third woman starts saying that, no, she got up and then her water broke after she got up. But she told them, don't worry about her because that was her fourth pregnancy. She know what to do. She good. She okay. Go, handle the woman that had went into labor. And as all this is going on, the instructor says that, she should have just canceled the class, because it was a full moon. And because superstition says when the full moon is at its highest, that the moon induces labor. It turns out that the second woman was not having soft contractions. She was actually going into labor. So they go over, and now they got to deliver the baby right there at the yoga studio because the ambulance hasn't arrived. So they're taking care of her. And I think she said that she was going to freeze her placenta, so they had to save the placenta and everything, and they give her the baby, and of course it's like a 9-month-old baby. It was so big. When all of a sudden a fourth woman goes into labor. I'm like, oh my God, there was about 10 women in that room, and I'm thinking, is everybody gonna have their baby tonight? So the issue with this lady is she was a very small woman. She was 4'11", and her baby was very big, and it was too big to travel through the birth canal. And so she told him that she had already talked about it with her doctor, and I think the doctor was telling her she was going to have a C-section. So of course they got to call the emergency room and tell them to prepare for an emergency C-section. And so we need another ambulance to hurry up and get this lady to the hospital. And they called her condition CPD. And I think it's sort of like the same thing that the people that are born with dwarfism go through, because if you watch Little Women Atlanta, one of those ladies was pregnant, but she wanted to have the baby naturally, and they went into the whole medical part of why it's so hard for little women to give birth naturally, because the baby can't come through, and about the birth canal is so small and everything. So they got that woman off to the hospital, so hopefully she was okay. So while they were doing all of this, the third woman, the woman that said that this was her fourth baby, she over in the corner, and she done delivered her own damn baby. I was like, this show is so funny. I mean, the acting sometimes is kind of bad, but the show itself is hilarious. So then we get call number 3. So this call, it comes in from a homeless camp. And they're saying that there's a guy, he's attacking people. So then when Athena and Henrietta and Chimney arrive, was it Chimney? I know Henrietta was one of the people. But anyway, when the first responders arrived, it was zombies of the apocalypse out there. So this guy they thought was on some kind of drugs because he's eating people. He done bit somebody hard out. Then he was over there on top of another man eating his face. And I think that this scene came from, I know it's happened in different places, but down in Miami there was a thing where the guy was on these bath salts, and he was trying to eat this man alive. I don't know if that man lived or not, but they had to shoot that guy and kill him, and that's exactly what Athena did to this guy. He was coming at her, she was shooting, he was still coming. No, she tasered him first, and he just ripped the plugs off, and so she said she had to shoot him. So Athena shot him, and I think she ended up having to shoot him in the head also to actually take him down. And so she was put on desk duty and everything. But when she was talking to her, I don't know if it was, no, because I thought her boss was a lady, but she was talking to a guy, and he was basically saying that he would back her up and stand behind her, and tell him that she had no choice but to kill the guy. So I think it was Henrietta that arrived on the scene, because then she got a phone call, and it was Miss Eva. So Eva said, even though you didn't come down there and speak for me with your first responder uniform on like I asked you, them people let me out anyway. So she was like, she done got a job as an accounting firm, and that even though it's an entry-level position, it's a beginning. She got her own apartment. And I'm like, Eva must be another woman or some money stashed away, because how she done did all this in just 1 week. But she wants to know if Henrietta will come by, and Henrietta said, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm happy for you. Glad you got yourself together, make the best of this opportunity, but I'm going home to my woman. So as she was talking to the lady, Athena walks up, and so she said, "Oh, I could tell that that wasn't Karen on the phone." And then she warns Henrietta not to let Eva situation blow up in her face. Like she ain't, come out with no names or anything. She said, "But I done seen this scene before, okay, and I know it ain't gonna end well if you don't take control of it." It was after that conversation that Athena was back in her office. So when she was sitting at her desk, she gets a phone call from Abby, and so Abby asks her to pull the police report from the earlier 911 call when she heard the lady talking in the background. So it turns out that the person that was in the room with the Kathy lady who was killed earlier in the show was the daughter of the woman who called in earlier and said that there was a prowler in her house. Imagine that. So it turns out that Kathy ran a support group for victims of domestic violence, and she had helped the older lady from earlier in the show, had helped her daughter out when she was being stalked by her ex-husband. So Abby calls the lady, to kind of warn her and tell her, like, hey, we think that this guy, that your ex-husband, may be on his way to see you. And she didn't really want to tell her that he had done killed Kathy and everything. So the lady looks out the window and sees him standing there. And so then I got to thinking, the reason that woman probably passed out earlier was because she realized that it was her son-in-law that was standing at that window. But then I couldn't figure out why she didn't tell them that she thought it was him when they came to help her. So anyway, they looking at him, he looking at them, he come kick in the door and got a butcher knife in the sand, but by the time he got into the house, they done like disappeared. So he's going through the house and he goes into the bathroom, and so he pulls back the shower curtain, and the old lady was in the shower and she looking petrified. And then all of a sudden he hears something behind him and he turns around, and Lenora had a bat. She beat that joker to death. And then she went back and got that phone, told Abby they take their time because she think he was dead, and she had no regrets about it. I was like, but I guess it's just a relief. Like, you ain't gonna be stalking me all my life and making me live in fear. And so it turns out that the reason he didn't harm the mother was because he really liked the mom, and they had like I guess they didn't have a good relationship because he was stalking the daughter, but he looked up to the mom and admired the mom, and that's why he didn't bring any harm to her. And I think they also figured out that he realized that Lenora didn't live with the mom, that it was somehow he traced the phone call or something like that. But anyway, it doesn't really matter because he's dead. So next we get call number 4. So a man calls saying that there is something inside of him. So Bobby and Buck arrive on the scene, and the guy named, his name was Connor. So it was Connor and Connor's man. We got a whole lot of homosexuality going on 911. But so Connor and his man, the man was trying to talk him into coming out the bathroom. He was holed up in the bathroom, and he said he feel like he giving birth. Like there's something in his body that's about to come out, that's about to push through. So my crazy butt sitting there thinking, okay, well, was Connor once a woman that done went through a sex change? Because y'all know that doesn't happen. That man, that whatever, went through the sex change, but still was trying to have babies and stuff. So that's why I thought we were going with the story, but no, it went a whole different route. So they finally get into the bathroom with Connor, and they're talking to him. So while they're talking to him and he's trying to explain the pain and distress that he's in, the husband or whatever he was, he's telling them, it's that sushi. We eat sushi all the time. And then he said, he's had the worst gas and he's had diarrhea. And Connor was like, can you shut up and stop telling these people this? And he was like, well, they need to know what's going on with you health-wise. So they decide that they got to take Connor to the hospital. So they get all in the ambulance and they on their way to the hospital when Connor started hollering, talking about he in pain and it's coming out. Well, honey, they rolled Connor over on his side, and why was it a tapeworm coming out his butt? And then Buck is so disgusted because then he like pulling the thing out and they talking to the guy. And I was just like, No, he was saying like, well, let me get it out because if it breaks, and it's gonna go back and it's gonna remanifest itself, and then you're gonna have surgery, and they're gonna have to cut it out, so just help me out, and he just pulling the thing and wrapping it around his hand and said that sometimes tapeworms can be 6 feet long. It's just like, this is so nasty and so disgusting, and I'm just like, and I know they're real, and I know they form in the bacteria and all this stuff in you, but y'all don't be eating sushi all the time. I love sushi, but I'm going to cut back on the sushi if that is one of the implications of eating too much sushi. So after that situation, the detective stops by to visit Abby, to apologize to her for not taking her concerns seriously. But Abby, she's so modest and telling me she understood he had a job to do, and she was just happy that she was able to be of assistance and to save the other woman, save Lenora's life, and that her and her mom were okay. And that's when we found out that the ex also, he loved the mother, and that's why he didn't kill her. So then Athena calls Henrietta to let her know that they got the toxicology report back, and that the zombie guy wasn't on drugs, that he was actually very intoxicated. And so she was like, if alcohol make you act that way, like, we in some serious trouble. So then the next scene, Henrietta goes to see Eva, and then y'all pretty much know what happens after that. And then Buck goes to see Abby, and y'all know what happened after that. So we just gonna blame it on the full moon. And when the show, really came to an end, it ended the way that it began, with Henrietta sitting out on the beach. And so I guess she was out there contemplating how she let the full moon get a hold of her and her emotions and take her on over there to Eva. So now she got some serious explaining to do with Miss Karen. And so I guess that's why she didn't want to have sex with Karen at the beginning of the show, because she had already had sex with Eva. So guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.